I'm having a chat with my client Claire today about her experience of working with me and some of the results that she's created through the coaching that she's done. So, Claire, I think sometimes when people, if they're new to coaching, especially, they can kind of think like, who has a life coach? What's that about? And so, can we start with just tell us a little bit about you and why you started coaching in the first place?
Yes, no problem. So, interestingly for me, I saw some links to some of your content on LinkedIn
Mhm.
through a mutual acquaintance, I suppose a couple of years ago now, and just thought, oh, that interesting account to follow. I'm not a massive fan of sort of lots of therapy speak, even though I've done therapy before and found it useful. It just felt like your content was very kind of practical and down to earth and really resonated with me. So I thought I'll just follow for a while. And then I was supporting a friend of mine who was really in a bit of a rut and felt really blocked, and was procrastinating about a lot of really important aspects of their life. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to, rather than recommend something that I can't honestly recommend, I'm going to try a free consultation with you, see what I think, and then see if I want to recommend it. And to be honest, by the end of the first session, I thought, this is really good. I really want to do this myself. Um, but obviously, like everyone was probably like, can I afford to spend that on myself? Is it a priority? You know, life's not that bad for me at the moment. Do I need this?
Mhm.
Um, but thought, I am going to give it a go and just do one block of sessions and see where that takes me. I think it's fair to say it'd been a while since I'd probably done anything that I would consider was completely for me.
Mhm.
Um, so I thought it was worth a try, really.
Yeah. And what from that first session, like what do you think there were the things that you thought that you would get from it? Like why did it feel like it was going to be a good thing?
I think for me, I'd made some really positive changes in my life anyway, just independently. I'd got a new job which I absolutely loved, and um, but I think I'd undergone a number of sort of personal challenges over a number of years, and I just kind of brushed myself off and got on with it as you do.
Yeah.
Um, didn't necessarily feel like I'd spent a lot of time thinking about those and what impact those had had.
Mm.
Um, and I am a single parent of an autistic now teenager with a mum with Alzheimer's. So it's fair to say that all of that plus full-time job meant I was very focused on what other people needed from me rather than what I needed. And I think when we first started coaching, I remember saying to you, even if somebody asks me what I want for me, I don't know the answer.
Mhm.
Even if someone says choose anything, I know what everyone else needs from me. I've absolutely no idea what I would choose if it was just my decision. So I really felt like I, I wasn't in a position to make choices or decisions. And I thought it might be really lovely if I felt like I knew what I wanted and therefore could maybe put some time into going for it.
Yeah. So what happened then? Tell us about like that first block and the first couple of months. What are some of the early changes that you experienced?
I think the really interesting one very early on was you gave me a bit of homework. Not that homework's a thing, obviously, from these sessions, just
Totally optional.
has terrified everybody. Um, but yeah, you said to me, well, just have a week where every time you need to make a decision, you give yourself permission to sort of say no as well as yes. Every choice you get, you take a pause and think, do I want to do that?
Mm.
And I think it became clear really quickly, just within that week, that a lot of the things I was doing and was telling myself I had to do, or they were expected of me, or they were a duty, were actually my choice. They were what I wanted to do. Didn't necessarily change the outcome, but did make me feel a lot better about doing those things, less resentful and sort of realizing I was in control. Um, And I think there were things I also said no to. I realised it was absolutely within my gift that, you know, my well-being didn't have to, or my mood didn't have to focus around my partners or my daughters or my mum or dad's or whoever else was around. That I couldn't necessarily influence who they were, but I could absolutely look at my thinking and be intentional about it and understand that I was in control of what impact that had on me. And I think I started to set boundaries quite quickly. Again, that was another thing that I thought boundaries had to be things that were really painful, where you had to have really tough conversations with people and it would lead to conflict and you'd upset them. And
yes. I remember that we had a session about boundaries, and it like such a big thing, such a like really like what's the impact going to be, and then the next week you'd like, yeah, just did it, it was fine.
Yeah. So you know, things like something with one of my family that, you know, be quite demanding, and I think I can't possibly say no, because if I say no, they're so reliant on me, you know, I'm going to make them ill. And I mean, I think I had all sorts of weird perceptions of, if I don't do this, this person's going, you know, it's going to make this person unwell. And I think it took you to say, do you honestly think that's the case, for me to think, hang on a minute, you know, but me being there and supportive of that person and helping them and doing things in a way that it doesn't damage my mental health is what's going to help and support them and mean they don't get ill. Not me never saying no, or never saying, well, I just need to prioritize this for 10 minutes first. So I think that was another really big quick win. And I think probably the third thing that really sticks with me is the manual, which was the whole idea of not about not having sort of standards and values about how you want to be treated, but the fact that we all have this kind of unwritten manual for how we'd like everyone in our lives to act, how we want them to load the dishwasher, how we want them to eat, how we want them to, you know, lock the door at night, whatever it happens to be, all these little rules. And when they're not doing all of those little things in exactly the way you like, they're in some way falling short of some kind of unspoken standard. And I remember you saying to me, you know, well, what if you just sort of put the manual in the bin? And I was like, that's ridiculous, Sarah. I can't possibly do that. You know, what if people just get to be themselves and you get to accept them and be compassionate towards them, and, you know, who they are doesn't influence who you are? And I think that sounds so blindingly obvious now, but I think that was such a revelation to me at that point. That, and don't get me wrong, the manual still crops up regularly, but I can, little alarm bell goes off and I hear your voice saying, manual might have just made its way back out of the bin. So I will catch myself in those moments and think, actually, that person isn't doing anything wrong, and just because they're not doing things exactly the way I'd like them done doesn't mean that I'm right and they're wrong, and I just need to let them be. And I think that's helped me to be a better friend and daughter, and certainly a better parent.
Yeah, so it sounds like that sense of like starting to like recognize your choices and start to have more control, also boundaries, and like feeling that like kind of separation between what other people do and how I feel.
Yeah.
Which is like amazing in itself. And then tell me like what else then, because we've been working together for a while now. Is it probably about 18 months?
Yeah, I think 18 months now, yeah.
And so like tell me then, because you did that initial block thinking like I'll try this and give it a go. And then tell me a little bit about like what your experience has been like of carrying on, having that kind of regular support, and some of the other results you've created.
I think the nice thing for me is obviously working with you, particularly that first sort of 6 to 12 months, I really felt like I was kind of developing a bit of a toolkit, so that it meant if I was going through things, even if I wasn't in a session with you, and I appreciate obviously I've reached out to you between sessions as well when things have come up.
Yeah.
But I have been able to kind of talk myself through situations and sort of coach myself through them. And then I think more recently, the really interesting thing for me has been looking at who I am as a person. And I think I always felt I was a bit of a chameleon and could be lots of different things to different people, and that potentially made me feel like I didn't know my own identity. I was a bit like the character in the Runaway Bride, where she just becomes the woman that she thinks her partner wants to be with. And I was really concerned that because some of my personality traits or my behaviours seemed to contradict one another, that's what I was doing. I just didn't really know my identity. And I think more recently, the fact that we've kind of looked at sort of Team Claire, all my different personas, and started to realise that even the ones I would have said previously were like potentially really negative, all have their value. And it's given me that shorthand where I can dial up certain aspects of my personality to suit whether it's doing an interview or giving a presentation, or needing to switch off and relax for a while, or wanting to be really focused on my daughter, or whatever it is. It's like a shorthand for me to be able to go, I've got that in me and I just need to ignore that other bit of me and just gently push them down. And I think delving into those different aspects more recently and fleshing those out so that they have given me that shorthand has just been incredible at work and also in my personal life. And it's also made me see the value of all those different ways of being, that they're not contradicting one another. It doesn't mean I don't know my own identity. It's just that my identity isn't one thing. Like most of us, sometimes we love being out and being outgoing. Other times we just want to kind of curl up at home with a book and not see anyone. And it's like, it's okay for both of those to coexist, but one is really useful sometimes and the other is really useful at other times.
Yeah, it is. And I think like the more you engage in coaching, the more you do learn that like you gain the ability to coach yourself. And it's about you doing that all the time whenever you want to and getting the benefit of that. And also it's great to hear the kind of like practical examples of like how you use that awareness in your own life, like public speaking. Is there anything else like that that feels like a kind of tangible example of how you've implemented it and done something different?
I think coaching generally, I mean, obviously in between all of those kind of all-encompassing aspects of coaching, we've at times set an individual goal or a something that I've wanted to focus on or achieve, and potentially looked at what the blockages are to that, and which part of me is potentially stopping me from pursuing that. So, I mean, I think the first example we worked on was that I hadn't taken my daughter abroad. She was 12 and I felt like that's something I really wanted to do, but it terrified me. And I think, we very much looked at what made me completely capable of doing that, what was stopping me from doing that, how I might best approach that. And I honestly feel, even though I'm sure to some people that seems like such a trivial example, but that was so important to me, to my life at the time, being a sort of finding myself as a kind of single parent and thinking, well, if I ever want to go abroad again, I need to do this. So I think sort of coming up with that self-belief and you helping me to remember all the times that I'd done things that were far more challenging that I breezed through, and again looking at the bits of me that would ace that. So let's just focus on those. And I think, it was so helpful to me to be able to look at it in that way.
Yeah. It's really fun just to kind of to think back to like where you started and then to be sat here now talking to like this version of you that's done all of that and achieved all of those things. And I'm sure people will love to hear about it as well. So I really appreciate you sharing it today. Is there anything you want to add, anything else that we haven't covered that you want to add in before we wrap
Um,
up?
well, obviously, I'm a bit of a coach convert, but I would say to people, I obviously looked at it for somebody else, or thought it was something that seemed like a bit of a luxury, or at first seemed like a really selfish thing to spend money on, or something that people who are like really successful or super professional, would have.
Mm,
I would just say it's been so transformational for me, for my life, for my relationships, that booking the next set of sessions didn't even feel like a decision. It's become so important to me in just getting the best out of life, really. I would say it's not necessarily about dealing with a problem. It's very much about being the best version of yourself, believing in yourself, and having somebody else inside your brain, whilst occasionally slightly alarmingly uncomfortable, is just such an amazing thing when somebody can pick up on the things that you're doing to block yourself. I think we spend a lot of time stopping ourselves from getting the most out of life, but convincing ourselves that other factors, it's other things that are stopping us.
mm.
Um, so I think, I would just say to anybody, give it a go.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because we count ourselves out of things in so many different ways. Like your brain saying, like, "Oh, you'd have to be really successful." And then I was talking to someone else just recently, like, that my life isn't that bad. Like, my life has to be worse. Like, we just like we can talk ourselves out of it in
Yeah,
various different ways. So it is, and people, if they're not used to it, can kind of wonder, like, well, who does that? So I
yeah.
think it's great to hear that and the difference that it makes. So thank you so much
You're very welcome.
and chatting with me. And yeah, well, we'll see you soon.